Welcome back to MLB This Week. It's the weekly podcast talking all about baseball, the Hall of Fame inductees, the Orioles hosting a hackathon for baseball, all this and a whole lot more of this edition of MLB This Week. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of MLB This Week. It's the weekly podcast talking all about baseball. My name is Rich.
And I'm Gary.
And welcome back, Gary. I hope your holidays were fine, and I hope all the listeners' holidays went well as well.
And so do I. It was a great holiday, Rich, and it's good to be back with MLB This Week. And I see you're having a little video problems there, but that's okay. We'll keep the show going no matter what.
Yeah, for our video watchers of the show, I'll be off for this week. I was trying to get the new studio working, and of course, you always have those gremlins, as we know about, and one of those days was today with the video gremlins, but getting back on the podcast here, it seems like it's been a month since we did a show, Gary.
Yeah, it's been a while, Rich. Tons of stuff going on. Of course, the big news in the world of baseball has been the Hall of Fame vote came down, and we have two new members of the Baseball Hall of Fame. Very exciting.
Yes, we do. And of course, we talked about it before we went away for our holiday break. Ken Griffey Jr., probably a unanimous pick for the Hall this year. And judging by the amount of votes he got, 99.3%, I could say he won in a landslide. But Mike Piazza also gets into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, Mike Piazza in his fourth try, 83% of the vote, and we're very happy here in New York. As you know, we've talked about it the last couple of years, and I felt very strongly that he should be in. And one of the reasons that he was not in was due to some people suspicious of some acne he had on his back, and they wanted to make a big case that he was doing steroids. Of course, he never failed a drug test or anything along that line. Never been mentioned with anything. It was just some couple of teammates, anonymous, I may add, a few years ago that was hinted at, but nobody ever came forward. Nobody took that report any further. And so he's finally in the Hall of Fame. And, you know, we'll see how the voting goes in the future, because some of the guys that were caught with PEDs, Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, Bonds admitted it, Clemens has never admitted it, of course, but they went up their vote total. So perhaps there's some softening by the baseball writers. They did narrow the class down of voters this year. They got rid of over 100 voters, I believe it was, guys that have not voted or are not really covering teams anymore. They've eliminated them, and maybe some younger guys that the PEDs doesn't bother them as much.
Yeah, it seems like we had a little bit of a different vote result, as you said, and coming in number 3 on the voting was Jeff Bagwell. Finished with 71.6%. Of course, you need 75% or more to get in. And Tim Raines finished with 69.8% as well, coming in at number 4. Not enough to get in the Hall. Trevor Hoffman finishing 5th with 67.3% of the vote. And Kurt Schilling, a guy that a lot of people think could be a good candidate for the Hall of Fame, finished in 6th place with 52.3%. So it was an interesting vote. Right behind Schilling, even more interesting, 2 players that you mentioned as part of the PED scandal, Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds coming in 7th and 8th. Interesting finish for them. I think they've moved up the ranks a little bit.
Yes, they have. Some people thought they would move up more, would get a higher vote total, but they did come up, I think, about 7 or 8% each from previous seasons. So they could be creeping up. They still have a few years left, and that could be, what they need to get in. Of course, it looks like next year Bagwell will probably get in. He should get enough, as well as Tim Raines, maybe Hoffman. Don't know so much about Hoffman, whether he should get in or not. I know he's a great relief pitcher and a closer, but so is Lee Smith, and he's not in. So how do you put Hoffman in without putting a guy like Lee Smith in? And so it'll be interesting to see the vote next year. Excuse me. Again, to see who goes with what.
Yeah, for sure. And next year, there's a whole new crop of new players that are in their first year of voting, eligible for their first year. Ivan Rodriguez, Manny Ramirez, Vladimir Guerrero, amongst a small group of new players that are going to be eligible, along with Tim Wakefield, Maglio Ordonez, Jorge Posada, a longtime Yankee there, and a ton of other players. So as we talked about a little bit before the show, that's what makes it difficult for some of these guys that finish well in a previous year to make it into the Hall of Fame. They have a steady crop of new players that some of them are instant Hall of Famers coming up each year for vote, and that could push them back in the standings.
You're right, Rich, 100%. But you also got to remember that next year probably there's only one or two guys that you would almost say that should go in quickly, and maybe three, and that would be Pudge Rodriguez, Vladimir Guerrero, and Manny Ramirez. But Ramirez was suspended twice for PED, so unlikely he'll get in. Pudge Rodriguez was suspected of it, so it'll be interesting to see if the voting of Mike Piazza in changes any of that. And Vladimir Guerrero, he's got a shot to get in the first time, but I don't know if he's a first time getting into the Hall of Fame first vote guy. To me, he was an excellent player, but maybe he needs a year or two before he gets in.
We'll see what happens next season. Of course, Ken Griffey Jr. was an instant pick for the Hall of Fame. He's 46 years old now. Came up with the Seattle Mariners in the first round. He was the first pick of the 1987 amateur draft. Had a great career. Started off with the Mariners and then finished up towards the end of his career with the Mariners. But in the middle there, he went with Cincinnati, and that was another part of this Hall of Fame section is the players go ahead and nominate which team they're going to represent in the Hall of Fame. So,
yeah, Rich, it's who are they going to represent? And of course, the Hall of Fame has the final say, but usually they if they can, they try to grant the wishes of the players. I mean, it would be a real shame if you get into the Hall of Fame and they say you're going in as let's say Mike Piazza, if they force him to go in a Dodger. He doesn't want to go in as a Dodger. He wants to go in as a Met. So allow him that, or allow him no hat at all, such as Greg Maddux, the great pitcher who was had great years with the Cubs and the Braves. He's went in with no logo on his cap. So, but these guys,
very interesting.
Yeah, you didn't know that.
That one, no.
Yeah, these guys have both said Ken Griffey wants to go in as a Seattle Mariner because as he did most of his damage with that team, and Mike Piazza wants to go in as a New York Met, so doubly exciting here in New York for that.
Yeah, and of course, Piazza had 8 years with the Mets. Really hit the bulk of his home runs with the Mets, 220 home runs over the career there in New York, 655 RBIs. He was the Rookie of the Year in 1993. Plenty of All-Star games that he's been selected for, as well as Golden Gloves and Silver Slugger. So uh, great to see those two players elected into the Hall of Fame. And they couldn't have picked two finer players. I've always been a Piazza fan myself since the early 90s. And I even have a jersey going back to 2004 with Piazza on it. So I guess the price of that jersey just went up.
Yes, it did. And it's in vogue again, so you can wear it.
Yes, indeed. If I could only fit in it. So.
Well, that's always a problem. We both have that issue.
So Mike Piazza and Ken Griffey Jr., now Hall of Famers. Of course, there's always other opinions. I found one today online. It was an article that went in several papers, and the publisher, the title of it was "The Sham That Is Baseball's Hall of Fame." And you're always going to have writers that is going to write something like this. Starts off by saying, "I try very hard not to care about baseball's Hall of Fame. It's a complete sham. A lot of the players enshrined in Cooperstown are there because they played at the right time with the right teammates." And then the writer goes on to list a lot of older players, especially through the 60s, things like that, that either should or should not have been, in his opinion, getting into the Hall of Fame. But yeah, it's not an easy job electing these guys into the Hall of Fame. I don't care if they had another way of doing it without the baseball writers, but there's always going to be controversies, not so much with these particular players that got elected into the Hall, but with players in general. So he makes his point there with all kinds of different players over the years. Ron Santo, for example, Mike Schmidt even. So if you can
How can you say Mike Schmidt doesn't deserve in the Hall of Fame? I mean, probably one of the greatest third basemen of all time.
Yeah.
Over 500 home runs. I mean, that's just plain ridiculous. And you know what? You're going to see things getting maybe even worse because this stupid sabermetrics are coming in. And you might see guys get in that really don't deserve it because of the so-called numbers. So, maybe this guy who wrote this article deserves to do a little bit of homework.
Yeah, he specifically mentioned Ron Santo, a longtime Cub. Took 32 years for Santo to be elected to the Hall. And it wasn't until the Veterans Committee corrected the writer's oversight in 2012, 2 years after Ron Santo's death, that he was elected into the Hall. But it just explains how things like that can slip through the cracks. It's not a perfect method by any means of electing people into a Hall of Fame, but I don't think you'll ever have a perfect setup in regards to this. But they try to do the best they can, does the Hall of Fame, and they usually get it right.
And look, we've been critical in the past, or I have been at least, over some of the voters and some guys getting in. But as you said, it's a tough decision. It is what it is. Look, David Eckstein got 2 votes, I think, or 1 vote for the Hall of Fame or something, and that's just plain ridiculous. But there's a lot of things that go into it, and sometimes you just it's especially in the Veterans Committee now. It's take a guy like Ron Santo. Those are guys on that committee that played against him. So they know how tough, how important, how big a ball player he was at that time. Doesn't always come up to be the numbers, though he had some pretty good numbers. He had some good years. It's just the way it works. And if the veterans want to put somebody in, I don't have a problem with that. It's there are guys that are, and I think that's why we have the first timers that get in. Those are more the immortals. Those are all the Babe Ruths and all that. Look, Babe Ruth didn't get 100% of the vote either. But then there are other guys that are deserving, but maybe a notch level. But do you keep them out? I don't think you do. I think you put them in because fans want to see it too. And when it comes down to push a shove, it's a fans game, and the fans should be able to get what they want. So.
That sounds great. And it is for the fans, and that's why they do it. So interesting there. And our next story coming up here, and I just found this recently, the Baltimore Orioles will be hosting a baseball hackathon on February 5th, 2016. And what is a hackathon, you might say?
I was just thinking that very thought.
They're not going to have a bunch of hackers try to hack into different baseball teams' websites, that's for sure. But it's a way of organizing baseball analytics with the numbers and creating new ways to represent and visualize data. So it's almost like crunching the numbers with graphs and charts and things like that. It's being sponsored by a company called Booz Allen and the Baltimore Orioles. It's going to be at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. Starts at 10 a.m. and runs over to 6 p.m. Teams of 3 to 6 people will be at this hackathon. And I guess it's just organizing data, presenting it in a certain sort of way, see how creative some of these teams can be. They'll be served breakfast, lunch, and snacks. They do still have limited space, so if you're thinking about something like this, go over to baseballhackathon.eventbrite, that's BRITE.com. You'll have to register on there. Hopefully you'll have a team of 3 to 6 people that will come up with an interesting way to present baseball statistics. And it sounds like a lot of fun, Gar.
Okay. I don't really get it. I don't know what the teams are all about. Are they competing against one another? Is it like a fantasy thing or?
Well, basically, yeah, there will be prizes awarded to the teams that do the best jobs, and they will come up with different ways to present data, like maybe batting averages, color charts, that sort of thing, pitching, ways to present the data in easier terms, almost like you see on some of these fantasy sites that players are ranked according to how well they do and things like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's the general idea behind it. These guys are going to set out to hopefully make that information be able to be displayed easier using the analytics that, of course, as you said, baseball is largely a numbers game, and a lot of people feed into that. I don't really buy all the WAR statistics and the sabermetric stuff myself, but there are a ton of people that do. So for these people, it'll be very interesting.
I guess so. I'm not a big sabermetrics fan. I think there's a place for it, but I think they're getting a little too crazy with the whole thing, and I don't know. I think you still got to watch a ball player play and see what he can do, and the numbers don't tell everything.
That's true. So still, it's fun. I remember a few years ago, before the DraftKings and people like that came on the scene, Bloomberg, located up in Manhattan there, had a great stat site and fantasy baseball site that ran in conjunction with the MLB.com site. I'm not sure if you remember that, Gary. It's probably about 5 years ago now. but they were at the forefront of things like this a few years ago, and they offered a nice program for people to use for a fee that were in fantasy baseball teams. So, this stuff is definitely hand in hand with the future of baseball. We've seen it on baseball broadcasts and things like that, how far a ball has been hit, the trajectory, the time that it took to get out of the stadium, things like that. There's just a lot of stats junkies out there that really go for this kind of stuff.
Well, you see, I think that kind of stuff is cool. That how far, how fast, all that kind of stuff. But when they start getting into breaking down the players into this one's a superstar because of whatever, because they've got a base hit or something. When I don't know, I can't even explain it because it's so confusing to me, the sabermetrics. But some of the stuff is, the bottom line is, who would you rather have it in a certain situation? Do you want a Mike Trout up, or do you want, I don't know, a Struble Cabrera coming up with the game on the line? To me, I want Mike Trout up because I can see what he can do. If his numbers don't bear that out, then so be it. But I'm still going to take Mike Trout over Struble Cabrera any day.
And that's for sure. And baseball's funny. It's not always the Mike Trouts that get the winning hits, that make the great catch, save the game for a team. A lot of unsung heroes in baseball, and of course, they're not going to show up on the top of the sabermetric charts that they're worth 10 wins to a team when they're only worth maybe 2 wins to a team. But still, those guys can come out and make history for a team, and have fans of specific teams remember them forever. So that's an interesting thing to remember about these sabermetric stats. It's not all it's cracked up to be, although it seems like it's gotten a lot more attention over the last few years.
And, of course, the big thing was Moneyball with the Oakland A's. But what have they done, really? I mean, they've made the playoffs a couple of times, haven't won a World Series. So, to me, it's not totally proven yet. I still think you need good scouting and good trades and things like that. And there is a place for it, a percentage place for it. But, some teams are really going whole hog on this thing. And even in football, you look at the Cleveland Browns, they hired the guy away from the Mets. And his big thing is with this analysis, sabermetrics. And, but you got to have everybody on board with that thing. You can't have a front office dealing with sabermetrics and then have a manager on the field that's going by his gut. It doesn't work that way. So I don't know. It's just, to me, it's a dog and pony show, and I'd rather have an old scout than anything else.
Very cool. So we'll have to see. Despite the Mets' success in 2015, how much of that is attributed to maybe this guy up in the office somewhere? Oh yeah, pick this guy, and this guy. You're not quite sure right now how much success is attributed to these guys. But as you said, I'm sort of the same way. Although I do like to read about these stats, I don't place a bet on the farm on them either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, we have another story here on the program, and it's good to be back, by the way. It seemed, like I said at the start of the show, it seems like a month and a half since we did one of these shows talking baseball. A lot of news piled up on us, and of course, you have a sad story for us here of a baseball player who passed away.
Well, yes, Rich, and then I want to go right into another story, but the first story is Dave Henderson, who hit one of the most famous home runs in postseason history, died a few weeks ago after suffering a massive heart attack. He was 57 years old. He suffered the The heart attack died at Harborview Medical Center in Seattle, according to the Seattle Mariners, who he had played for. He had undergone a kidney transplant in late October. And the home run, if you remember, it was in 1986 in the playoffs. He had a ninth inning, 2-out, two-strike homer that lifted the Red Sox to a Game 5 victory over the Angels in the American League Championship Series. The Red Sox won Game 6 and 7 to advance to the World Series. And if I'm not mistaken, he hit that off of Donnie Moore, and that really was sort of the end for Donnie Moore. He never recovered, eventually committed suicide. But Henderson also hit another big home that's not even mentioned. People forget. He hit one in Game 6 of the 86 World Series as well that could have possibly given the Red Sox the World Series, but of course that was the miracle game that the Mets came back, and but he had hit a home run that was big in that game as well. So Dave Henderson died at the age of 57 over the break, and our condolences go out to his family. The other story I wanted to talk about, Rich, and it's really a discussion. Something I read about over the break was that there's ideas floated now and then, and who knows whether it'll take hold or not, but a national stadium for the MLB. And to sum it up briefly, the Major League Baseball would build a baseball stadium, perhaps in the middle of the country, who knows where, and it would be used for perhaps all-star games, maybe Game 7 of a World Series, if not the whole World Series, college events, international events like the World Baseball Classic and whatnot, and things like that. And it's a discussion that's been around for a while, but it's seeming now that it could be gaining some steam. And what do you think of that idea?
Sounds pretty interesting. I'm not sure where they would put it, or would it be enclosed or something like that. But yeah, this is the first time I'm hearing of this. It does sound interesting. It almost seems like maybe they want to expand that a little bit more with doing some displays and maybe some baseball education as well in a building like that. Not necessarily like a Hall of Fame, but we got to remember the Baseball Hall of Fame isn't run by baseball. So
Right.
maybe this is an idea of getting some more education and interest towards the game. So that would be good. The location should be interesting wherever they're thinking about putting this. Of course, for AllStar games, it shouldn't be a problem in the summer, but for games in the fall and all, if it's in a colder climate, that could be an issue.
Mm-hmm. I would think they would try to do it in the middle of the country somewhere, perhaps where there's no baseball even, and try to build up an area with hotels and restaurants and stuff, so it is a go-to site. And I was thinking about this the other day. The World Series would be great, but because it's over a period of time, like a week, I don't know if it would be feasible like a Super Bowl, but perhaps you could have 3 games in each park, and the 7th game would be in this particular stadium, and make it almost like a Super Bowl. I don't know. It's you can't have a week off between Game 6 and Game 7. That's for sure. It's an interesting idea. Maybe perhaps the World Series would not be, but that's your the diamond in your jewelry of baseball. So I guess, but the All-Star Game I think would be a great idea. That's where you don't have to worry. You know where it would be every year. You could make your reservations from year to year, and I don't know. It's an interesting idea whether they'd want to foot that kind of bill for a stadium. And as you say, it'd have to be in a location, and would they want to have a dome on it, or a removable dome, retractable dome on it. It's just an idea. I thought I'd float it out there, and it's one of those things that's interesting to discuss about the game of baseball.
Yeah, they certainly have the money to build a complex like that. It would be very interesting. I sort of like the way they do it now, though, with especially with the All-Star Game moving to different stadiums. They do reserve a lot of those tickets for sort of the local fans to take part in an All-Star Game. Of course, people coming in from out of town that do as well. But I sort of like that traveling show type of all-star representation as well, because it gives the other teams a chance to get familiar. Like when it was in Cincinnati, you may not have heard too much about Cincinnati baseball, but for those few days you did in the media and also elsewhere. So I'm kind of a fan of that, but I'm sure, you know, a stadium like this would have good use, um, and we'll have to see if it comes to fruition.
Yeah, the thing is now we're going to have a thing this year that's going to be interesting. If I'm not mistaken, it's going to be in San Diego, the All Star Game, and the American League will actually be the home team, I believe, this year. Last year was in Cincinnati. Am I correct? Was it Cincinnati?
Yes.
Liz? Yeah,
Yeah, I believe it was Cincinnati. Yep.
I believe this year it's going to be in San Diego. So, and I believe that the following year may be in Miami. So, American League clubs are not getting involved in this, and I don't know whether they're not. I'm not sure of the exact procedure to get into the to request having an All Star game. I believe at one point in time that it was you have to request it. The team has to request it, or the city. Not sure if that's still the case, but if it is, apparently the American League teams aren't, or cities aren't so eager to have it, or whatever, because they've been picking National League cities. Minnesota being the last in what 2014, and then it was in Cincinnati, and I believe San Diego this year, and if I'm not mistaken, Miami next year. But yeah, I kind of like that, to travel and show bit. Don't have a problem with it, but it's just an idea thrown up there about having a national baseball stadium. But it is a lot of money they'd have to lay out, so I don't know if they'd be willing to do it.
Yeah, I believe they each city makes a presentation to host the Midsummer Classic, and yeah, it just seems that the last few seasons have been uh, National League venues, but maybe some of the newer stadiums that have been built have been National League type of parks. I know Miami has a couple years under its belt already, and I remember reading something about that, whereas they're going to be paid back somehow, the American League clubs. But for now, it's been all National League, and it's been better for us because we're National League fans. But yeah, I know a lot of the American League guys are probably wondering when it'll come back to American League Park.
Yeah, it's just they could have it out in Boston, not Boston. I'm sorry, Houston and stuff. Let's see. I got the list up here. Um, yeah, this year's in San Diego. Next year it's in Miami, and in 2018 it's in Washington. So, um, 2019 is yet to be determined. That could be an American League, but that'll have a streak of 4 years in a row in National League parks, and the next three, as I'm looking at this, San Diego, Miami, and Washington, are all going to be National League parks. So, very interesting that it's going that direction, and not a lot of the American League parks are getting into it. But as you say, there has been perhaps more new parks in the American National League than in the American. and they're getting the games.
Yeah, and looking over a few articles about the All-Star Game itself, the voting, since they went with all computerized voting last year, the MLB canceled as many as 65 million All-Star ballots. Now that sounds like it's getting out of control a little bit. This voting seems like it can be gamed easily online, whereas before they used to actually have to tally paper ballots in addition to online voting. But that's a big number. 65 million All-Star ballots were canceled last year.
Yeah, I think it's time to go back to the paper ballot, and or they've got it. This is a big industry we're talking about. They can't come up with some kind of voter fraud thing, or see. I think there's too much vote, and they let you vote too many times.
Yeah, the 25 times per email address
It's a little ridiculous.
Yep. And despite, of course, last year, the game being held in Cincinnati, National League Park, the American League won. So it doesn't always mean that National League's going to win that game. They won 6-3, did the American League. So, it's just a fun time where baseball comes together, and we'll have to see what happens in the future in regards with this stadium. But we wanted to invite you all to stop by a place that you can listen to a lot of the shows like you're listening to the one right now over at baseballtalkradio.com. There's 33 shows now at present, all talking about baseball from all over the world, from Japan over to Europe, and right around where you live here in the USA, from coast to coast. There are plenty of fantasy baseballs. There's even a baseball podcast that talks about turf and grass maintenance. A little bit of talk for everyone there over at baseballtalkradio.com. Of course, Gary has his show there called Mets Musings, and he also does a show for the Brooklyn Cyclones on the New York Penn League. And I'm there as well with Phillies Talk. And of course, you can find our show that we do here, MLB This Week, right there as well. So we want to invite everybody to check us out. And Gary, I hope 2016 will bring some more audience interaction with our show.
I hope so. I hope everybody out there will continue to listen, and we'll have new people listening in, and spread the word around because we're here to stay.
Yes, indeed. As well as we have our own Patreon site. We're listener supported. You can go there, be the first one to jump on board, sponsor our podcast, get us up to a little bit where we can get to a hosting service, a new hosting service for you. And we'd love to have you stop over there. It's Patreon. That's patreon.com/MLBThisWeek. $2 or $3 donation per month. You can go on your PayPal account and just sign up right there. We'd appreciate it. And be the first one, because we still haven't gotten our first sponsor, Gary.
Still waiting for that first patron, but come on, folks, give us a helping hand out here.
I know you're out there. I know you want to sponsor our show. So moving on with the program here, something I was reading over the holiday that we took, Gary, the off-season training for baseball stars is really setting them apart from other players, and that, of course, the two big winners in the American League and National League MVPs, Mike Trout and Mr. Harper over there with the Nationals, they've been tweeting out some pictures and some Instagrams of their workouts, and it's getting a tremendous amount of response from people, and you can really see how these players excel so well on the field from the kind of workouts they're doing. For example, Mike Trout has a personal trainer that he hired from his high school days from Millville, New Jersey, and they're very old school. They're not with all this new equipment and all as much. They have a huge tractor tire, which is about 5 feet high itself, And what they're doing is they throw about 100 pounds worth of weights inside the tire well, and then Mike Trout has to go ahead and push this tire about 10 to 12 feet several times. So that particular video is making its rounds over the holidays. Just monster workouts that both Bryce Harper and Mike Trout do to keep themselves in shape in the off season. And these guys really, really arrive at spring training just raring to go.
Oh, they certainly do. And that Mike Trout workout kind of sounds like Rocky. Which one was it? 4, I think, when he fought the Russian Ivan Drago. Remember, he went to the farm up in the snow and worked out with all the old equipment, hoisting motors and stuff like that to build up his strength. While Drago had all of this top of the line, state of the art training facility, and here's Rocky running through snow up a mountain. So, kind of sounds like that with Mike Trout, what he's doing with pushing the tires and such. But it works for him. The results are certainly there.
Yeah. Yep, and of course Trout signed his 6-year extension, which starts to kick in this year, $144.5 million, the first installment of that this year. So the fruits of his labor are about to start getting paid big time there in Anaheim. And Mike Trout joining the multi-millionaire club for 2015, and couldn't happen to a nicer person. He's really down to earth. Just takes his gift and just runs with it. A lot of stories about him this offseason. Another one from his hometown, a place called Jim's Lunch Counter. He's been known to go in there and once ate 13 hamburgers at this place. It's called Jim's Lunch in Millville, New Jersey. So a lot of tidbits coming out about Mike Trout over the years, and it's just fun to watch him progress as a major league ball player.
I'll say he's a terrific ball player.
So moving on with the show here, a new announcer joining a longtime announcer, Joe Buck, in the booth, and I think he answered a lot of prayers with this next story that you have, Gary.
Well, Rich, we were pretty critical. At least, again, I should say myself, I was pretty critical about the whole World Series, the announcing team with I can't remember now, Harold Reynolds and Tom Verducci. Well, they're out, and John Smoltz is in. John Smoltz will be replacing Tom Verducci and Harold McReynolds in the MLB in the Fox broadcast booth. If you remember, Smoltz was doing the game on MLB, the World Series, and I can't remember the other guy's name he was with. And in game 1, I believe they lost Fox lost the connection, and they actually switched over to the MLB, and that was a much better broadcast. And so Smoltz is going to Fox. He'll still be MLB Network, but he is going to Fox to do their games, and that includes the AllStar Game and the World Series. So we all can breathe a sigh of relief that Harold McReynolds or Harold Reynolds, whatever his name is, he is no longer going to be in the booth. Still got to put up with him on MLB Network, but no longer in the booth. And we'll have John Smoltz and Joe Buck. We have to put up with Joe Buck, but at least John Smoltz is I thought he was a very good analyst, and we'll get to hear his insights instead of Tom Verducci and Harold Reynolds.
Yeah, and I wasn't not a fan of Harold Reynolds, but you couldn't get away from a baseball broadcast without him on it.
Yeah.
I believe he did the division games, he did the pennant games, then he went right into the World Series, and it was just an overload of Harold Reynolds. Just much too much. Not that he's bad, but you just need a different voice, a different opinion, a different way to go about things. And I don't think it's a reflection on his job that he did with the broadcast, but I think he was oversold big time last year.
Well, I have to say I've never been a fan of his, so I would disagree in that he was equally awful in all division and championship and World Series games. So I'll disagree with you there, Rich, but never been a fan of his. I always thought he talked too much and he usually contradicted himself or just came out with some stupid statements. And he still does it on MLB, and I don't know how they keep him there. And as well as he started with ESPN, I believe, and they fired him for something, and I forget what the cause was, so I'm not going to say. But I know he lost his job there, and I was shocked when MLB picked him up. But what are you going to do? He's around, and you got to put up with it. But at least he won't be on any of the big games anymore.
So big changes for the National League Fox broadcast there as far as the playoffs and the World Series are concerned. And you have another story of national importance. A couple players, Ryan Zimmerman and Ryan Howard, both suing a big-time news agency.
Yeah, Rich, and I don't know if this broke before we did it, whether we did the last podcast and mentioned it, but there was a big report that came out, some kind of documentary from Al Jazeera. Now, how Al Jazeera got involved in sports, I don't know, but they came out with this that said a number of players, big expose, a number of players across baseball and football did distributed and used HGH and steroids, and they linked Peyton Manning as one person, and Ryan Zimmerman and Ryan Howard were named in this documentary, or the so-called documentary. Since then, the guy that was interviewed in the documentary has recanted, say that the whole thing was made up. It was a lie. And Al Jazeera says they have another source. It's really kind of a mess right now. But Ryan Zimmerman and Ryan Howard are fighting back against these claims, and they have filed lawsuits against Al Jazeera claiming defamation of character. So we're going to have to see how this plays out. They both have the same lawyer. So we're going to see how this comes out. It'll really it'll be interesting, because will they say it's privileged, news privilege information? They can't give up their sources, yet they did have their sources out there. So, and the guy that was interviewed that claims that he was involved in this, he'll probably be called as a witness, and it'll be interesting to see what he says. But it's just it's funny how something can come out like this and just really bring a whole new light to everything. And just when we thought we were getting over this, that somebody's got to come out, and Peyton Manning came out with it and said that he denied it vigorously. I mean, it's come down that it came in his wife's name to the house, and who knows? Maybe his wife was doing it, working out. Who knows? But the implications right away, the accusations and implications are that he used it, and that Zimmerman and Howard, but they're all taking action against Al Jazeera. So be interesting to see how this case plays out.
Yes, it will be. And of course, Denver Broncos quarterback Peyton Manning was also mentioned in that report. And it was also, when we were on break, it did debut on the Al Jazeera America broadcast on December 27th, right after Christmas, was when this report was played. But yeah, I don't know how much faith you can put into this. It was called The Dark Side: Secrets of Sports Doping, this documentary. And maybe, like you said, Gary, there's some rogue reporters that are putting together these reports and sort of packaging them up for these networks to play. But I think maybe in this case, if it's not true, they're going to end up paying a big sum.
Well, what's interesting too is these guys were linked to a clinic, and there's also a link to Derek Jeter. So that's getting a little very little news, but it has come out that there was a link to him. That's not saying he did anything, but there was, a link to him. He knew a guy that knows this guy, something like that. Who can understand half of this stuff? It's not the kind of stuff that we want to talk about on a daily basis, but it's there, and it is news. And so we'll see how it all plays out. Whether or not Al Jazeera gets away with it, if they are indeed making it up, or they were led to believe by somebody that pitched the story to them, who knows?
We'll be finding out as the lawsuit unfolds. Another trouble for a former baseball official has been announced. The Justice Department announced last year in June that it was investigating St. Louis Cardinals official for allegedly accessing another team's scouting report. And just the other day, a former Cardinals director of baseball development named Christopher Correa pled guilty to accessing unauthorized access, 5 charges, accessing the Houston Astros player files without permission. Each charge could bring a 5-year prison term and a $250,000 fine. So what started off as maybe a way to try to get an in on another team has backfired tremendously on this St. Louis Cardinals former employee. And you wouldn't think that they would need something like that information anyway, Gary.
Well, maybe that's how they stayed so on top all of these years. Who knows who else they were hacking into? I believe that somebody had left earlier. The Cardinals went to work for the Astros, and maybe that had something to do with it. That they took some of the program with them, or whatever. They had come up with some of the programs. It's crazy. It's just crazy. But welcome to the modern world, I guess, right?
Yeah, and he'll certainly pay the cost for that. Besides losing his job, he could go to jail for 5 years for each count. So definitely not a smart thing to do, and backfired tremendously for this guy, and don't recommend it.
No, I'm with you, Rich.
You have our final story of the show here for our first show of 2016. Pretty funny one to end this show.
Well, Rich, I guess everybody remembers that while we were away as well, the Miss Universe pageant took place, and the Steve Harvey, the host, made a big mistake by announcing Miss Columbia as the winner when it was actually I think Miss Philippines that actually won. And he just read it the wrong way off his cards, or I don't know how he could have, but he screwed it up somehow. And then further complicated the matter by going on Twitter and spelling both countries wrong. So, but in light of that, the Frisco Rough Riders of the AA affiliate of the Texas Rangers have decided to they are going to announce a celebration of Miss Columbia and all other all-time great second-place finishes with a runner-up night at the Dr. Pepper Ballpark. The night will take place on April 26th, which is the second game of the second homestand of the Riders' 2016 season. They plan to invite the girl that lost the Miss Universe, Miss Columbia, as a VIP guest. and she will enjoy a suite for the night, an opportunity to throw out the first pitch. They are also going to invite Steve Harvey to serve as the on-field host for the special event. And with the night celebrating famous second place finishes, the riders also have extended an invitation to Jim Kelly and Andre Reed and Marv Levy of the Buffalo Bills, and Adam Lambert and Clay Aiken, American Idol runner-ups, Al Gore and Mitt Romney, presidential election runner-up, and Cowboys running back Darren McFadden. He was a two-time Heisman Trophy runner-up. So little bit of a sense of humor, and we say it's always those minor league teams, Rich, that come up with these crazy ideas, and it seems they pull it off. It seems to work for them. So.
Yeah, it's a great program there, and I love the team names in the minor league baseball as well. Great program there. I doubt Steve Harvey will show up for it, but making the rounds along with this huge jackpot that the Powerball's been up to, over $1 billion now. Saw some humorous things on Facebook about Steve Harvey's going to announce the winning Powerball number. So check your tickets, ladies and gentlemen. Check your tickets.
And go by the numbers that are on the screen. That's what he says.
Well, that about does it for our first show of 2016. It was show 76 of MLB This Week. Gary, it was a pleasure joining you again on this show, and can't wait for the next one as usual.
Yep, same here, Rich. I'll see you next time.